Hello, this is Adam Bernard with AutoPerspectives. It's time for another look at some of the more interesting stories we saw in the auto industry over the past week or so. Given that we are leading up to both the New York Auto Show and the Shanghai Motor Show, things were a little quiet last week, but still a couple of things worth talking about. We first heard stories about an entry-level Defender or a Defender Sport almost 2 years ago. And while the Jaguar part of JLR may be in trouble these days, Land Rover is doing pretty well. And obviously, over the past 2 years, we assume that Land Rover has been working on this vehicle because we have now spotted official prototypes of this vehicle on the road. Autocar has taken a shot at what this new entry-level Land Rover would look like. It's due in 2027 off of the new EMA architecture that was developed internally by JLR. This replaces a platform, CD-EU, that was originally derived from the old Ford Fusion and Ford Mondeo back when Ford owned Jaguar and Land Rover. Initially, EMA was expected to be a multi-energy platform, which means it's capable of supporting both electric and a variety of internal combustion related powertrains. And then they pivoted and said, you know what, EVs are taking off, so we're going to make it an EV-only platform. And then EVs started to slow down a little. So they appeared to have pivoted back to multi-energy capability, which means that this Defender Sport, originally envisioned as an EV-only entry, will likely offer some sort of internal combustion powertrain as well. The EV is expected to include an 800-volt electrical architecture for quick charging. Now, in the spirit of the kind of slowdown in EV demand, not drop off, just slow down, the original Land Rover plan of 6 EVs by the end of 2026 has been pulled back to 4. And that's expected to be the Range Rover Electric, which is due out any day now, the Range Rover Sport, the all-new Range Rover Velar, which will also use the EMA platform, and its smaller sibling, the Range Rover Evoque. Now, recall that under JLR's new brand strategy, Defender is intended to become sort of a brand on its own. Not really sure I buy that, but the thought was that Defender, which right now is just one vehicle and 2 body styles, would become a family of vehicles, like Range Rover has become a family of vehicles. Defender on its own sold about 114,000 units globally last year. One would assume that a smaller, more affordable Defender Sport that may not be quite as capable, but has a lot of the characteristics of the bigger Defender would do quite well. It will compete with the upcoming Baby G-Class, which Mercedes announced a couple of years ago, which is also due around 2027, and a new wave of Chinese off-road oriented SUVs. So this looks like a good move for both JLR and the Land Rover brand, especially working with an all-new architecture. The current Corvette, or C8, is over 5 years old, so depending on how you do the math, it's about halfway into its life cycle, if history is any indication. Past Corvette life cycles have run anywhere from 7 years to almost close to 2 decades. GM has already committed to an all-electric portfolio of light-duty vehicles by 2035, which, believe it or not, now is 10 years away. If they stick to that commitment, which they may or may not, that would have to include the Corvette, unless it gets some sort of a corporate level exemption. This UK design concept was designed by former Lotus and JLR designer Julian Thompson, is one of 3 new Corvette concepts to be shown this year, as General Motors works on what we assume is going to be called the C9 will look like sometime between now and perhaps the end of the decade, or even a little further out than that. It has peaked fenders like the C3, a mid-engine proportion like the C8, gull-wing doors like the Aerovette from the 70s, which was a concept that was intended for production, and of course this rather unique Apex design feature, which results in a central spine that runs down the center of the vehicle, which emphasizes, as you can see in this image, a split rear window like the 63 Corvette, as well as a split windshield up front. Now, even though it is a mid-engine proportion, it is designed to be an EV, so it is zero emissions. Chevrolet notes that the aerodynamics of this concept are aided by fan assistance and active ducting to redirect air over and through the vehicle. It's also got reconfigurable surfaces and a deployable dorsal fin. Is this the actual C9? No. We are going to see, as I noted, a couple more concepts this year. I would expect that some elements of this might make their way into the C9, or perhaps none of them. GM has not indicated any particular direction from a powertrain standpoint. We know there is currently an E-Ray Corvette in market, which is hybrid. We don't know if they're going to raise the level of that to add a plug, for example, in the next generation. So we'll have to wait for more news. But clearly, GM is committed to keeping the Corvette around in one form or another. The current Audi A1 has been around for about 6 years, and its companion or SUV sibling, the Q2, has been around for almost 9 years. So both are around due to be replaced. But like Mercedes, who have been announcing plans to trim their entry luxury portfolio to move the brand upmarket, which includes killing both the A class and the B class. Audi is following a similar route, at least that appears to be the case for the moment. They have announced that both the current A1 and the Q2 will cease production without direct replacements, instead relying on a single vehicle to replace both at the low end of the Audi portfolio. It's worth noting that the large, expensive, prestigious Q7 actually outsells the A1 globally, so Audi does seem perhaps less of a need for a larger entry luxury portfolio. This particular vehicle, which we expect to be called the Q2 e-tron, Audi has announced it's entering production late next year, although sales might not start until 2027. It will compete with the recently launched Volvo EX30 and Mini Aceman, among others. And while a lot of the Audis share the new PPE architecture, this will share the Volkswagen Group MEB platform, which we see under the Volkswagen ID3, ID4, Skoda Enyaq, etc. And it'll share that platform with the larger and more prestigious Q4 e-tron sibling. No other details available. We have a rendering here that was shown in Auto Express. And as we get closer to the production launch, we will probably actually see what the production version looks like. I would not expect it to deviate too much from what we see here. At the Consumer Electronics Show in 2024, Honda announced their new 0 Series family of EVs. And then this year at CES in 2025, they followed it up with 2 reportedly production intent prototypes. What appears to be a camouflage prototype of the 0 Series SUV, which again may carry some different name once it gets its way to market, debuted at the Japanese Grand Prix last week, with production still set for next year. So we are probably somewhere between a year and a half away from seeing the production version of this vehicle. But if you'll note the image here, a lot of times we'll see a concept vehicle, and then for production it gets significantly watered down. Think of the original Chevy Volt concept, and then how that went from concept to production. Honda appears to be sticking very, very close to what we saw at CES in 2025. It has some pretty dramatic proportions. Some might call them a little awkward looking. They are definitely rather unique. I don't think you could look at this and mistake it for any SUV currently on the road right now. But you'll note it now has real conventional rearview mirrors. It also has flush deployable door handles. The new platform itself will use a light, thin battery pack, compact drive units, and likely 800-volt technology, at least based on the charge times that Honda has been quoting, as well as Honda's new Osmo OS operating system. Honda also notes the new platform will use 3D gyro sensors to, quote, enable dynamics at the will of the driver on various road surfaces. Overall, this looks to be a pretty impressive set of hardware. It'll be joined by the 0 Series Saloon, which is a very dramatic wedge-shaped sedan. Honda has been kind of on and off again in terms of whether they believe EVs have a future in this business, at sometimes preferring to stick with hybrids. They've been collaborating with General Motors on SUVs. This particular vehicle looks to be around the size and market position of the Honda Prologue, which suggests that the current Prologue may not get a replacement, at least a direct replacement, as this vehicle kind of slots into the lineup. But this vehicle also seems to be pretty sophisticated and better than some of the other Japanese SUVs we've seen, EVs we've seen, notably from Toyota. So again, we have at least probably 6 months to a year before we see the final production version. But as noted, it appears to be quite close to the concept. And that about wraps things up at AutoPerspectives for this week. I hope you got a little education out of what we just went through. If you like what you see in here, please subscribe and feel free to share with your friends and colleagues. And with that, we will be back next week with some highlights from the New York Auto Show. Thanks for listening.